You are now entering the horror sanctum.
Howdy, and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. And this week we're joined by producer Blake Babson. Blake, welcome to the Sanctum.
Thank you for having me. Flattered.
Yeah, absolutely. We are also equally flattered. So you worked on several films and television series, including the Fright Night remake, House of Cards, and the Avengers. But today we've asked you to select a film for us to chat about. And honestly, the film that we chose is one I've been looking for a reason to go back and revisit. It's 2015's The Invitation, which is available on Tubi. It's also available on Pluto TV, I believe. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it, come back. We'll wait for you. So if you're not familiar with the film, it follows Will while attending a dinner party at his former house. He soon starts to believe that his ex-wife and her new husband have sinister plans for their guests. Again, we don't want to give spoilers. It's not that old, but I do recommend you watch it and come back if you haven't already. So with that being said, let's take our seat at the dining room table and dig in.
So are we not giving spoilers the whole show or just not the upfront?
No, we always give spoilers.
Yeah. I know. I thought you were throwing.
I'm just warning. I'm just warning the 2,000 listeners and watchers that there will be spoilers. So they do have the option to go watch this movie for free and then come back and enjoy it with us together, or they can just listen.
Okay, fair.
Have you not done the show before, TJ? Come on.
Yes, but I thought, you don't usually say that, so I was like, okay, that kills 2/3 of my content. So this might be a shorter show. Anyway, yeah, this film flew under my radar up until this past October. I noticed it started appearing on a lot of people's like best of list and like movies you probably haven't seen that you need to see. And it was streaming on Peacock. It's still, as of this recording, it's streaming on Peacock and several free services, including Freevee and Tubi. So it's very accessible, easy to watch for free. It's a very indie film. Is actually directed by the lady who directed Girl Fight, which was the movie that put Michelle Rodriguez kind of on the scene before, the Fast and the Furious movies and all the, insert tough girl roles that she's taken over the years. Her name is Karen Kusama. That was her first wrote and directed debut, the Girl Fight film. Actually, her husband of 18 years, Phil Hay, he and his writing partner have written a lot of kind of big budget Hollywood movies like Clash of the Titans, things like that. So he and his writing partner wrote The Invitation, and they produced it totally independently. Low budget, shot it in LA, and they did that so they say, so they could have total control over the production without any studio interference. And I think that was a great idea for a small film like this, where it's mostly one location, low budget, it's a lot of people in a room, it's kind of talk heavy until that last kind of quarter, 20 minutes or so, where the action really, it just builds to a crescendo. I don't know that with having a big studio involved, if they would have gotten the leeway to be able to draw out for over an hour, about an hour 15 minutes or so before really the shit hits the fan and all the actions, like, it's all pretty condensed there in that last quarter. But man, this is one of the most uncomfortable films to watch just because of the social interactions. Because we've all been to a party that we kind of felt like the odd man out or didn't quite know why we were here. And just imagine in the scene, and with just a little bit of information we get in that first scene in the car before they hit the coyote, and then that's a whole nother mess to try and go into a social situation after having to have just murdered put a defenseless animal who you accidentally hit with a car out of its misery, mercifully.
I would have just gone home after that. Like, okay, I'm gone. I'm done. I'm out. I'm going home.
Yeah, like I'm already going to this awkward party thrown by my ex-wife who I haven't seen in 2 years, that our marriage ended tragically after the accidental death of our son. I mean, and also I haven't really seen any of these friends that were our collective friends. I mean, it seems like the worst possible scenario ever. And then you throw in, I have to murder this coyote unexpectedly about 5 minutes before. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. This would have been a very short film if I'd have been the protagonist. Never would have got to the party. But we have to see through the character of Will the tension. I mean, he's very much the vehicle of which the audience gets to take this ride. And I was noticing, this is now the second time I watched it. I watched it in spooky season last year, and then I watched it a couple days ago. And I noticed much more so this viewing that he's not really a great boyfriend in this party. Like he's almost never with his current girlfriend, who he's already taking into this terribly awkward situation, and just kind of doing his own thing. Randomly, he's always just walking through the house trying to look at his old house that he hadn't seen in a couple years and have PTSD memories and stuff. while she's just trying to be, good representative of the couple here with all his old friends, I'm sure, asking him lots of weird questions she doesn't know how to answer. And anyway, it becomes very clear, about a quarter of the way into the movie why they've brought them here. They've joined this weird cult in Mexico, as you do when you're getting over, a terrible loss or tragedy. And they found their will to live, or their joy, their bliss, whatever it is, and they want to share it with everyone. And of course, as most cult things do end, it doesn't end well. And man, just the way this movie ratchets up the tension and the awkwardness. I would say I would lead heavy with the awkward social interactions, because they put so much of it the on Will, the main guy, like, oh, you shouldn't feel weird about this. We're all just having fun here. And then he thinks that his friend has been murdered because he gets that call. And of course, as in any of these isolated and one location films, you can't have cell service until you go to the very edge of the property outside when you're being a weirdo again. And
Which,
then
in defense of the screenplay, is very accurate for Mulholland Drive and the hills. It's actually a very true. It's one of the few times in a movie that's accurate.
Yeah. Well, in the hills, and you got all the trees and all the things. I mean, it's one of those things where it definitely services the plot. But in all these modern films, I think you and I, Blake, have talked about this. You have to have a mechanism to cut people off from their technology now, or else it just doesn't make sense. Because when you're one call away from 911, suddenly that isolated situation isn't so isolated anymore. So it's good that they can do it in a way that is accurate. But of course, he thinks that they've killed and stuffed away his friend who showed up early before everybody else. And then he comes in literally about 5 minutes before everybody really does realize that, oh no, he's just right. But they make him really feel like an asshole right before they start trying to kill everybody. Which I think was just a expert 1-2 kind of punch. It's like you ratchet it up to where you think the big reveal is going to happen, then you let all the wind out, and then when the wind's out, you give them that quick gut punch and be like, "No, you were right." Too few films trust the writing, I think, enough to be able to kind of pull that off well, and just let the audience down just enough to get them off track to then swerve them again. Which I love. I love it when a film does that. But I think this lives kind of in that almost that mumble gore kind of Adam Wingard, The Guest, You're Next, but not a slashery. Somewhere in that kind of category. It's got that where it's mostly the horror is in the relationships and the people and the awkward interactions and the being stuck in this space with these people who are weird, and then you get strangers who are weird, and you have to kind of deal with those people. And you're just layering up the tension and the awkwardness. And then you add horror elements on top of that, and then chef's kiss. It's a great fun time. I love the ending, because it hints at, without having to really show it or have much production value to get the point across, to end with the fact that, oh, they've been signaling this is a coordinated effort by a much larger cult. And there's a lot of people out in the Hollywood Hills that are having some bad parties this evening. And to just end with the sounds of, police and sirens and chaos going off, and to see all those red lamps lighting up the hills, which the main antagonist had just done recently to kind of signal that this was happening. Man, I could probably watch this movie every year because it's just so expertly done. But Blake, this was one of the ones that you chose to bring to us. So tell us what your relationship is with this film, how you got turned on to it.
Yeah, I missed it when it originally came out. This was a quarantine film for me, sitting around the house trying to find something fun to watch. And I don't usually jump on films that I can kind of feel like I might be able to predict, right? One house, okay, something goes wrong. So I almost put it on like as an eye roll, saying this might entertain me for an hour and a half. And then what I love about the movie is it not only is it, I love efficient scripts. I love scripts and films that do a lot with very little, which I think this film does perfectly. But I also love it because it's also very specific to people who, uh, not just the social awkward element of going to a dinner party you don't want to go to, but if you lived in LA, I lived in LA for 13 years, you've been to parties like this, maybe not where a cult is introduced at the midpoint, but where you might know some people through other people and they're a little strange and you kind of want to leave, because the real monster in this movie is like the group dynamic, right? Because whenever someone would talk to me about this film and say, "Oh, I would have left," I always tell them, "Don't be so sure." Group pressure, peer pressure is a really powerful thing. There's been about 100 years of studies to prove that people will kind of stick around longer than they should in bad situations. And I think this film, like you were saying, TJ, every time you think he should be leaving now, there's another reason why maybe he thinks he should stay, right? They give you another little stone to follow. And I would argue that they don't really even need, watching it a second time, they don't really need the gimmick of the phone service being out, because they never really use it. By the time a character says, "I'm calling the police," that's at the point where things are about to pop off anyway. So they actually could have gotten away with never even using it as a gimmick. I think they used it just to kind of make the audience feel better. But honestly, everything is paced so well in this film, you never go, "That's unrealistic," right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this film, for me, I locked in at the point, obviously there's that awkward tension that you were talking about, which is just uncomfortable. It's like a really long episode of Nathan For You or something, right? Where it just keeps pushing the envelope of awkwardness and the character, is it Sadie, like the weird character that
Yeah.
it's kind of comes from nowhere, and you see her kind of in silhouette at first.
She's almost like a Manson girl. Like
Exactly.
kind of.
Yeah, I think you were 100% spot. That's a little nod to the Manson family.
Overly
for sure.
sexualized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She is so good. She, on second rewatch, might be my favorite character, only because without her, it's just some kind of normal people who might have some issues. With her added, you immediately believe the cult. I feel like you believe that this person could have been sucked in by this, so that makes everyone else kind of believable after that point. But the anchor of the film, I think, is John Carroll Lynch in Pruitt. I think for me, the moment he walks into the house, I was in. I was already liking the tension, but when Pruitt walks in, and the power he holds, the size of John Carroll Lynch, he does it very well in Zodiac as well. If you've ever seen Zodiac, he's the potential real killer in that film. He's able to carry that. Every mood in that film is carried by him so well. And I think he actually kind of saves it, because I think if you didn't have a good kind of personification of the danger, then the film would have gotten a little silly, I think, at some
I
point.
agree. Kelly and I were texting back and forth about him. He's phenomenal in everything, and he plays creepy to
Oh,
perfection. Like anything he's ever been in where he played that type of character. And yeah, I agree. Bringing him in is kind of like almost an enforcer type
yeah,
in this situation did save the film a lot.
it did.
Yeah,
He's a physical
that was one of the
threat.
things I was going to talk about too. Is he's just so fantastic. He's
great
one
in
of my
everything.
favorite character actors that doesn't
Totally.
get the credit he deserves.
Yep, he shows up and hits home runs whenever he's on screen, and he also has a monologue that also didn't hit me as much as it did the second time, where he describes he's trying to get
Killing his
sympathy.
wife.
Yeah, he's trying to get sympathy by telling a story of him essentially getting drunk and beating his wife to death, and he almost pulls it off. By the way, it's such a good monologue. It's such a good performance that you kind of start to think, oh, maybe he is this reformed guy, until everyone's reaction is, well, no, you just told a story about you murdering your wife, and we don't really care if you went to prison. You really shouldn't be here.
After they just showed a video of watching someone die while everyone breathes in her spirit.
Right, exactly. And that, like I said, the moment he enters, I was sold. The moment, again, the director, she really knew how far, again, another reason why I wanted to talk about the film is she knew how far to take each scene and how to extend the tension enough without ever becoming gratuitous. When Claire, the character, again, brilliant writing point. It's fine. The screenwriter in me loves the screenwriter knew we need someone to leave now or want to leave, right? This is getting so silly that the sane person here needs to leave. So Claire gets up, says, you know what, I'm not feeling well, I'm going to go home. And you just see Pruitt follow her out to her. Oh, are you the Prius? I parked behind you. Let me just pull out. And you see him flag her down. They go around the corner, and then they don't show anything. They distract you again. So you're constantly given another breadcrumb that's just enough to wet your palate to continue down this sick road that they're making. And
I don't know if anybody else noticed, but he came back with a coat on his arm.
I didn't notice
Oh,
that.
I
But
didn't notice that.
it wasn't the coat she was wearing. So I don't know if that was supposed to mean anything or not. But when I
Interesting.
watched it again, I'm like, he has a coat, but I rewound. It's not the same coat. But
That's really
I
interesting.
wished it was, because that would just be like a little subtle nod to what we, assume happened anyways.
My last point I want to talk about, which I think, Jay, you said you had something to talk about. Again, watching it a second time, the film chooses to show our main characters, hit a coyote on their way up to the party. Not only is it a nice little jump scare that, again, isn't gratuitous because it happens, especially up in those hills. They hit this coyote and they put it out of their misery. That is such a great way to immediately set a tone and to immediately focus your audience and make them feel like, well, if that can happen, what else can happen? And it's done literally, I think, before the 60-second mark of the film starting. It is done almost immediately. And that, again, that shows a director that's aware that she has to kind of grab her audience and let them know where this is headed. I think it's done just perfectly. All very just pitch perfect.
And in a film that's made to be a slow build, you almost have to have that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that was that. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, I kind of watched this today, and I think I'd seen clips of it before. I didn't really know what to expect. It's one of those films to where if I just look at the images of it, I'm gonna first think this is probably overrated, just from the image, because a lot of these type of films are like when you think like, what's the big deal? I really liked it though. Watched it, was really surprised by it. Everything was done really well in it. The tension, the building, the characters, even from the start, like everyone said, the coyote gets run over and it's foreboding, right? There's something to come. And you just feel so bad about Will just because, he's in this house and he's kind of reliving this trauma and this PTSD, and he's walking around and he is snooping around a lot, but I really felt bad for him because he's kind of like has these memories of this house and the kid, and that's kind of a good reason that he wouldn't leave. Is I think there's something there that's just drawing him back into it, and I just think something like that, it's a very odd situation for anyone to go through. So I can understand like that's really a weird place to be in mentally, especially when you see your wife, your ex-wife with a new husband, and you can see he's kind of full of shit. And then you can see your now ex-wife is kind of full of shit, which you can clearly see from like the first moments with her on screen. She's crazy. Like she slaps the friend and she's got this smiley bullshit aura around her.
It's a
And you're
great
like,
performance. It's a great performance. Yeah.
oh yeah, it's like classic cult, right? That kind of stuff. And that's kind of what cults do though, is they draw you in, they make you feel like you need something that they have. And like what you were talking about earlier, TJ, the big fake out, when you overreact, they're just like, it's okay, we love you. Like that's what they do. And that's kind of what they do until they overreact. And then by the time they overreact, it's too late. You're either dead or part of it, right? That's unfortunately just indoctrination with cults. It's like it's scary, right? It's terrifying to think about, but it's happened with Jonestown. It's happened for years and years with all these different cults. It's how they get you, right? Yeah, it was interesting when I first saw what's his name, John Carroll Lynch show up. That was the first thing I thought. I was like, oh boy, this guy. I'm like the Zodiac killer. Because I think that movie makes a good argument about Arthur Lee Allen, right? I know that there's real life evidence against it, but right when I saw him, I was like, holy crap. And then when he does that speech where he's talking about his wife, him killing his wife, like if I was in that group, I think that's the point where I would just be like, I would be like, I'm sorry, I just shit my pants. I have to go to the bathroom. Like I'd figure out a reason just to get out of there. But I also understand that whole thing, which you're talking about, like the indoctrination and the idea of social pressure, where you're in a situation you want to be nice. Like a society, we're taught, and even says it in the movie. He says, "Why is everyone being so nice?" And I find that fascinating because he's one of the only characters in the movie besides Eden who's been through something so traumatic like that it's almost like he doesn't have fear. He's willing to go against this because he's faced something far worse than death. He's faced his own child's death. So it's like at that point, your mind, it's like he's really prepared for that in a way. And I thought it was interesting that he's the one that's like saying, why is everyone being so nice? This is fucking weird, this whole thing. But I just thought, the execution was really well done. I thought it was interesting when early on, when they open the door and he relocks the door and Will is talking to David and he's like, why don't you leave the key in? And he's like, oh, we got a lot of home invasions, but he could have left the key in because if it's locked, you still can't get in from the outside. But if it's locked from the inside, you can't get out of that door, right? So that was kind of another foreboding, like, what are you up to? What are you doing, right? The only thing about the movie that does not work for me on any level is the ending. I found that ending to be so stupid, just because I get it's a cool thing to put in a film. I understand as a screenwriter, you put that in a film and you're like, oh shit, that's one of those moments at the end where you're like, it's happening everywhere. It's kind of dumb. Like that's not realistic. That doesn't.
It's fun dumb though, John.
It's
fun dumb.
But it goes against the whole story, right? I mean, you're taking this story and you're making it into something. So it would have been, and I understand it would have been anticlimactic if it was just isolated, but realistically, it would have been isolated. I mean, it's not gonna...
What's more terrifying, like the fact that it was just an isolated incident? Like, was your problem the lanterns in general, or just how many there were?
I just think it's the idea that they turned it into like the Purge, but with cults. I'm like, that's kind of stupid. Like, that's not right. Because my whole
You're kind of stupid.
Well, that is, I am in fact kind of stupid sometimes. I won't disagree there.
We all are.
But like I think it's just with any film, I think when you're taking on a journey, you have to like take it in the context of the story. So within a movie like this, you're in a reality-based scenario. So when you get to the end and they hit you with something like that, you're just kind of like, what? Like it'd be one thing if it was like a little more fantastical, if it was like you're next, like what you're talking about, where it's a little more ridiculous. You can do that, but that's the only negative I have on this movie. I mean, everything else is just really stellar, great acting. The suspense is great. There's really nothing I can pick apart about it other than that ending. So yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think.
So I'm going to get to the ending towards the end of my part, and then I'm going to crap on everything John said because he's a big dumb idiot. um, but y'all touched on a lot of the psychological parts. I'm just going to kind of pick apart the movie just from a idiot myself who didn't look into the deeper meaning of anything. I do agree that they did a really good job with the cult being able to attract people, because that's what they prey on. Everybody that was part of the cult were grieving. They had something that had happened to them that they didn't have an answer for, and this guy's providing an answer. And that's how a lot of cults get you: is you don't have the answer, we have the answer for you. Yeah. Just come with us and we'll help you feel better. We'll help you push that pain away. And it's a community of healing. And Will is kind of the skeptic, right? Like, he's grieving too, but he's grieving in a more visceral way. Like, and that's part of what infuriates him too, is seeing his ex-wife almost be completely numb to the fact that they lost a child. And you know, I have 2 daughters, and if one of them was to die, I can't imagine how long it would take to get over that loss. I don't know that you ever could. And so you can see his frustration and anger at both of them for just pretending like sadness doesn't exist, like pain isn't real, like there's just a quick fix that all you got to do is breathe in the aura of some dead person, and all of a sudden, you know, all your pain goes away. It just, and like I said, that's how they get you, that this false promise of everything's gonna be okay. And it's usually some psychopath that's gonna kill everybody anyway. So we touched on John Carroll Lynch. He's brilliant. I remember him all the way back in the Drew Carey Show days. He was in The Walking Dead, American Horror Story, Shutter Island. He's one of those people you probably don't know his name, but you have seen him in something, and he has been fantastic in that something. Like I said, he's one of those character actors that when he comes on screen, you know that you're in for something. Even in the part of the movie where he's doing his monologue, basically telling his truth, he comes across, he increases the tension of this movie, which doesn't let up. From the moment they hit that coyote and he has to put it down, this movie does something so similar to The Silence of the Lambs. That's what I kept thinking while watching this. I can't think of another movie in my mind that keeps you uneasy for the entirety. And that's kind of what this movie does. Is you don't know what's going to happen. You have a sense, you have an idea, and your idea ends up being correct, you know, because you kind of go into it knowing that something's going to happen. And then the further it goes, you know that something bad's going to happen. But even
we can
without
make you a list
doing
of movies that do that. We'll make you a list of movies that make.
No, I'm just saying, like, I can't think of any in recent memory, like just ones that we've watched recently, that does that so well, that keeps you, I don't know how to put it. You just feel off the whole movie. You feel like, Will, there's something off. I can't put my finger on it. I have an idea.
Gonna drop, kind of thing.
Yeah. And then like Blake said, when it starts to happen, but it doesn't, and then it does happen, and then you're just like, I really also, the one part that took me out, and it's a personal thing, and since we're all about the same age, you might have the same sense. Toby Huss will always be Artie, the strongest man in the world, to me, and it doesn't matter what role he plays ever.
Wow.
Every time I see him, I always just think of him moving a house a half inch just far enough when the guy tries to open the door, his key hits the doorknob instead of the
Pete will always be his only accomplishment.
He's the whiz, and nobody beats him. And
he's also the whiz. That's true. Yeah.
There you go. Like
he's also peanut butter on the penis guy and the Halloween 2018.
Yeah. I don't remember that, but I also tried to block that franchise out of my mind. So, but like I said, the movie's predictable, but it's not predictable in a way that leaves you disappointed. The biggest twist, obviously, is the ending. And to argue John's point, I feel like, and that very similarly mirrored Fight Club, right? The ending of Fight Club when he's shot, he reaches over, holds her hand, looks over the landscape as all hell's breaking loose. Um, so I thought that was a neat visual. What I will say is, in the modern era, it would make more sense than to try to congregate a bunch of people together to try to pull people into your cult digitally. They show that when they're showing the video on the computer of their mantra. They're kind of explaining the vaguely vague enough to where it might pull your interest in. So I could see a situation where this is all choreographed online in a digital sphere where these people across, almost like a purge, where all of these people across, maybe even just that area, but maybe larger. It could have been, beyond just their city. But I could see how, especially with everything sucking now, how easy it would be for people to be. I mean, look at all the televangelists that get millions and millions of dollars sent every year without question. I mean, one of the richest televangelists in the world, what's his face, looks like the definition of a snake oil salesman, that was blowing COVID away. Kenneth Copeland, he's worth like almost like $250 million shot of $1 billion, and people still send him money. So I could see somebody with enough charisma or enough likability pulling people in and causing a catastrophe on that kind of scale where they look out and they just see more red lanterns. And I liked the hint to it earlier too. It just shows it. There's nothing spoken about. There's no, other than Will kind of like, what's he doing? He lights that lantern, and it's the signal that it's the beginning of the end. So I was pleasantly surprised with this movie. It also, it moved so quick. Like when I was watching it, I checked the time and I was an hour in and it felt like I had been watching it for 20 minutes because it's just, and not a lot happens. That's so rare where you have a movie where there's not a whole lot going on outside of dialogue, but it moves along so well. So yeah, this movie did exactly what it wanted to do, and it did it very well. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I know Jay liked it. Not to give away spoilers, but I'll pass it to him to bring us home.
I hated it. Like I said in the opening, like I was looking for a reason to watch this film again. I have a lot of sporadic notes, and I want to focus mainly on the coyote. But my other notes were like, first of all, I'm Will at any party. I'm checking the medicine cabinet when I'm going to the bathroom. I'm suspicious of everyone who's too nice or smiling too much. I'm constantly checking the exits to know where they are. Like that's me. And like I said, if I hit that coyote in the beginning, I'm turning around going home because the night's already screwed for me. But the first time I watched it, like I said earlier, it was just one of those, and I don't know if I said this before we started recording or not, but it's one of those films I had zero expectations for. And then after I watched it, I wanted everybody else I know to watch it. That was the impact it had on me. And just because the atmosphere and the tension and the score, like the whole time, like it's paced so well. And the whole time you have that pit in your stomach. And that, Kellen, touching on that, where you couldn't think of recent memory of movies that made you feel that way. A lot of the A24 horror movies are kind of that way. I think as a society, we're moving away from jump scares and slashers, and we're getting more of that. This movie makes me uncomfortable, like Human Centipede uncomfortable. Like you're still watching it, you can't take your eyes off of it, but you're not scared. You just have that pit in your stomach, and there's a pit in your stomach from the jump in this movie.
It's like it's like you want to look away, but you can't.
Right. The boyfriend, Michael Huseman is his name. I fucking hate that dude in anything he's ever been in. I can't stand him. So as soon as you see him, like, oh, he's gonna do something shitty, like it's coming.
He is the definition of a resting schmarmy face.
Yes. Like I don't know what it is about him. I cannot stand him. John Carroll Lynch, perfect, always perfect. I didn't even click the guy played Artie. I know him most from Carnival, the HBO series that lasted 2 seasons. He was Stumpy, and I've just seen that show so many times. When I think of him, that's the show I think of.
You know, he also did the voice of Khan on King of the Hill,
I
the
didn't know that.
Korean
Yeah.
neighbor.
But again, like if I'm going to this party, I'm that SpongeBob meme where he's like, all right, I'm gonna head out. That's me from the get-go. Touch about the key in the door. There's the scene where David answers the door, like someone knocks on the door. We never see who it is. We don't understand what they're saying. So I think that kind of ties into the lanterns at the end. It's someone who's in the cult. They're like, hey, when's this shit going down? What time? You know, I don't know, remember what he says, but something along the lines like, you know, play it by ear, or when, blah, blah, blah. In my notes, it completely contradicts John. I put that the lantern scene was truly terrifying. I compared it in my head. I can't think of the movie, but it's a post-apocalyptic movie that's pretty recent in the last 5 years. But the opening scene is all these planes coming over the school as children are letting out, and this black dust just like flies over everything. And that's what starts this apocalypse. That was one of the scariest things I've ever seen in a movie, because it's something that can truly happen. And that's what I kind of trace this back to. It's like, oh, the Domestics. That's the film. If you've never seen it, it's a great little film. It's got the guy who just played Superman in the Lois and Clark series, and blonde that was in Blue Crush. I can't think of her name, but anyway, it's a good movie. But that was just terrifying to me when that happened, because you knew something was up when David put the lantern out. Anyways, you know, it just wasn't for funsies. Like, I'm just, you know, build the atmosphere. Like, look out. He purposely looks out, and you know in your gut there's something else going on here. Now, the first time I watched it, I wasn't expecting that at all. I wasn't expecting to see, you know, dozens of lanterns across the hillside. But to me, that truly creeped me out the first time I watched it. There are also a lot of Christian and religious parallels in the film. I don't know if anybody else caught it. There's the part where they're all going upstairs to have dinner. They're ascending, you know, like he shows their feet going up. And then even when they're all sitting there, it's parallel to the Last Supper. With Will as Jesus, I guess. But
well, another thing there too, that could be a parallel is after Jesus died, which is the only son who died, their only son died.
Yeah.
What did all the disciples do? They go into the upper room of this place, and they're supposed to wait, which is kind of what this whole movie is. They're waiting
Exactly
for
what
the
it
thing
is,
to
yeah.
happen.
Yeah. But as far as like little pieces, that's it. I love the film. I loved it the first time. I loved it more this time because, and that's the beauty, and I've said it on other episodes, the beauty of us going back and rewatching some of these films is the opportunity to catch things we didn't see initially, or we didn't think about initially, or after I watched it again, I'm like, I'm going to Google some things. For example, this whole next segment is all about coyotes. You know me well enough, you know that I'd rather see people die 1,000 times over on TV and movies than animals. So the coyote thing, I always take half a star on my ratings whenever an animal dies, which is why Cannibal Holocaust has 0 stars, -10 stars if I could give it. But the first time I watched, I'm like, damn it, coyote, like, that's sad. That's all I thought about it. The second time, I'm like, that represents something. So you'll forgive me for, I'm going to be reading a lot of this from paper because there's no way I can remember it all. But I Googled the significance of coyotes.
This segment brought to you
dreams.
by Acme, the hater of Wile E. Coyote.
Off the tracks here, but you see, like, Warner Brothers made a Wile E. Coyote versus Acme movie, and no one's picking it up, so they're just going to fucking destroy it. Like, it makes no sense. Like, just put it out. Put it out. Anyways, again, I'm going to be reading this, so I do apologize. I'll be looking down a lot, but this was just something that the first thing I grabbed was like, there's something to this coyote, and I just wanted to do a little research on it. So a coyote is a symbol of wisdom, cunning, and survivability. That last word is key, survivability. If you dream of killing a coyote, it means you're falling victim to the lies and deceits of others. Check. Instead of believing them, seek to find the truth. Don't let them prey on your vulnerability. Check, check. So that falls right in line. And I didn't read anything from the director or the writers, but that's 100% what they were, trying to push forward. Killing a coyote in a dream is symbolic of a change in your life. Obviously, a big change came. Killing a coyote represents overcoming obstacles or desire to control over a difficult situation. check, check, check. Like it's just checking all these boxes of Will. Like he knows something's up, so he's looking around, he's snooping, he's keeping his eye on everybody. The emotions of killing coyotes in your dreams. So if feeling strong and successful in your dream that you killed this coyote can indicate that in your waking life you'll be faced with a challenge that you will overcome, which Will did overcome. On the other hand, if you feel sadness, guilt, or regret, like moi, it can indicate your regret in decisions or actions, which also check that box. Overall, a dream about a killed coyote can indicate an upcoming change that one will successfully master. It can also mean that you will let go of old behaviors and habits and embark on a new path. So it just blew my mind, all the parallels.
That's it. I'm in. Where's the Kool-Aid? Give me the Kool-Aid. I'm in.
Kool-Aid. My Band of Horses beer. But
it was actually Flavor Aid that they drank. They couldn't afford Kool-Aid.
So I also
they weren't cool enough.
I also read that killing the coyote and how he felt kind of represents the four cultists in their current state and how they're currently feeling. They're in deep pain. They want to be free. It foreshadows Will's emotionally killing of his ex-wife after she requests him to do it at the end of the film. So that, I don't remember what I gave this initially, like rating wise, out of 5. It was probably a 3.5 or a 4. But spoiler, we'll do our rankings here in a bit. But that alone, like just doing that little bit of research and seeing the dots getting connected like that just boosted it up big time for me and made me enjoy this movie so much more than I did originally. So that's that. That's my whole fucking sheet on coyotes.
Wow. Well, it really made me appreciate it more. So thanks for doing that research.
Yeah. And like I've told Kellen before, I don't remember what movie it was. It might have been Beyond the Black Rainbow or some other heavy movie. Like sometimes these movies that make you think, it definitely benefits to just take some time and Google it. Even if you Google something simple as like today I did Zone of Interest ending explained just to get a little bit more background on what was happening. That always helps. That's what I did here. Like I want to know the symbolism and I want to know all these emotions and everything. So
after I watched Donnie Darko for the first time 20-something years ago, and the early days of the internet, I went on a deep 3-day rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
I
Message
was about to
boards.
say that movie was horrible for the early days of the internet. You know
horrible.
how hard it was to try to understand what
Yes,
happened?
I
watched
do.
it 3 times in one day.
I thought you were saying Donnie Darko was horrible, and I was about to end this fucking friendship real quick.
No, that spoiler, if we ever cover it, that's a 5-star movie for me.
Yes, it is. Did anyone else see the sequel?
No.
S. Darko?
S. Darko.
Fucking terrible. Fucking terrible. Anyways, if anyone else have anything to add before we get around to our rankings?
I had something that I didn't notice the first time that I just think is interesting because it breaks convention. At the crescendo 3rd act moment of insanity, the first person to draw blood is Will. He actually
pushes the girl.
He actually essentially kills a person at the time. He's a 99% certain something's going on, but he's not 100% yet. And he essentially kills Sadie.
It was self-defense though, right?
It was self-defense, but I found it really interesting that
she comes back later.
She does, right?
Yeah.
She does. But what an interesting script choice to have Will be the one who draws blood first, which is a little unconventional for a film like this. You would think it would be the gunshot, the Pruitt character, whatever. I found that kind of an interesting choice. It didn't need to happen that way.
And in that scene, that's kind of a brilliant red herring, because they show the only person to drink as they go around. You see her throw the drink back, and then before you can process, because your mind's immediately going to go to something like Heaven's Gate, where this is how they're going to kill them. And then that happens, and it's so alarming. It completely takes you out of the fact that, she's about to die.
Yep.
Because you knew that when she drank it, but then you're immediately pulled out of that mindset because you're like, oh my God, he just killed that girl.
Yep.
Another thing I didn't notice until the second time I watched it was the whole first part of the film, they're drinking wine all in their living room.
That was in my notes too. They're conditioning them to drink the wine to get their guard down.
But on the first part of the movie, it's always out of bottles, and you see them open the bottles, but it's out of this decanter when it's this final scene.
Mm-hmm.
The Sadie character was great too in that one scene where she was making the faces in the mirror. That I think that was just her. Like, what am I going to look like when I die? Like being dramatic, like making all those faces. Like, what face do I want to make when I move on to the other side? She was a great character. All right, so Blake, we're going to go around and give our ratings. We give what we think this movie is out of 5 stars. We'll start with we'll just go in the order in which we talk. So we'll go TJ. What would you give this one?
Yeah, this is one of the rare movies that actually goes up with rewatches for me. I probably would have gave this somewhere around a 3.5, maybe a 4 the first time I watched it, but I just keep seeing new nuances and new things to like about it. And I'm sure I'll probably find more. So right now I'm at a 4.5. I love this movie.
All right, Blake.
Yeah, I'm right there. 4.5 out of 5 for me. It's I want to give it a perfect score, but I also don't want to be, for anyone who watches on cinema, I don't want to be the guy who gives 5 out of 5s all the time. But no, it's about as perfect as you can get, especially for a film with no budget, a simple location, one, very thin, efficient script. I think it's about as good as you can get as far as a fun, quick horror film.
Yeah, John.
Well, here comes the fun ruiner. Whack, whack, whack. I was gonna address a couple things. So you're talking about Fight Club killing. I love Fight Club, one of my favorite films ever. I would argue that because the similarities, because Fight Club is very surreal, very insane. Like there's nothing about Fight Club that's practical. By the end of that movie, that ending is so fitting because there's nothing in that film that exists in a real world scenario. This film,
I just meant from a visual perspective.
Well,
Them
yeah,
holding hands
sure.
and staring
We're
off
not
as
even
the
supposed
world
to be
burns.
talking about it. Guys.
Sure,
We're not even supposed to be talking about it.
yeah,
True.
well, exactly. That's true. Yeah. So I just think with the ending for me, like a lot of times with movies, when they do something this straight laced and they have a story that's straight, they do these cinematic holy shit moments. And it's really cool for the moment, but like it just my opinion, like it just kind of takes me out of it because it's almost like they're taking me down one road and they're like, "Whoop," and I'm like, that doesn't really line up with the script writing. But it's just my take. I know a lot of
You
people
could also
like
look at
that.
it as it just showing just how many people are in that mental state, in that hurting. People
Yeah,
you don't
I
even think
mean,
about. It's kind of showing the grandeur of how many people are suffering in the world.
yeah, it's just I don't know. I just go along with like it always fits the script, and this is one of those things where it just took me out of it. But you were talking about A24. I do think there's a lot of good A24. I think there's a lot of mediocre A24 that's way overrated, but that's just kind of what's happening in our society now.
Looking at you, talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to
I
me.
liked it. Not
but-
great, but
You
I liked it.
would.
But that being said, I think it's a really good film. It'd probably be a 3.5 out of 5. I don't think it's like there's nothing about it to me that's like a legendary film, like a top 20 or anything. So that's why I keep the review a little bit lower. But 3.5, I mean, I would almost lean closer to a 4, but I'd say 3.5. I mean, it's really good.
I
Don't get me
challenge you
wrong.
to watch it again, John, because that's exactly
See,
where I was after watching it in October.
Here's the thing, though. I don't believe in one thing I don't believe in is I don't believe in watching a film, being underwhelmed by it, and then rewatching it and being impressed because I find it's
It
fine
happened to me.
It's fine to find things about a film that are interesting later, but I find if something doesn't immediately grab you first watch, like I don't believe in that whole like I have to think about it later more to give it a higher rating. I never believe in
That's
that.
fair.
Any film.
What if Kellen agrees to rewatch Creepshow?
Well,
Dun,
he's
dun,
already
dun.
no, he doesn't get a second chance. He's already crapped on it.
Not my fault. You like turds, John.
Oh,
All right, Kellen, what would you give it?
Yeah, I for a movie that telegraphs and foreshadows exactly what's gonna happen, it does it so well that you enjoy the journey. You know your destination is, everyone's gonna die or most of everybody's about to die in this house. But the journey getting there is so well done that you don't care that what's gonna happen. So for that reason, the acting's fantastic. The way it's shot, the cinematography is brilliant considering they're using such a limited set. I give it a 4. Yeah, solid 4 film.
One of my biggest things about movies and not giving 5 stars or close to it, is the rewatchability. And this is one of those movies that shouldn't be one that has a high amount of rewatchability, because once you see it, it's done. Like, you know what's going to happen. But again, watching again, you catch all these little things, and I want to share it with other people. I want other people to watch it because it impacted me. So I gave it a 4.52. Again, I think originally I gave it a 3.5 or a 4, but after watching it again, which I do think, John, you should watch it again without any distractions. And Kellen watch Creepshow again, but that puts us at a 4.2. So that give us a 4 for The Invitation. I think that's beyond fair. Again, TJ, you said it was on Peacock, it's on Tubi and Pluto. You know, go watch it.
Some other
be in a
thing.
good headspace when you watch it. You know, don't go in it sad because you might join a fucking cult. But
I think the ending was it for me. If the ending was different, I would give it a 4 or 4.5. That's what gets it for me, is the ending. I hate that ending.
I was thinking, like you said, it takes you down one road. I mean, it does take you down a road, but instead of changing the roads, I think it just drops you off a cliff. You know?
Yeah, and I think that kind of movie's been done so much. I think it's hard to come up with a new original ending. Like, I think that's their new original ending, and you know, for me it worked. For you, it didn't. But I'm glad they took that swing.
Just turn it off a minute early, John, and then it's the John cut.
Like,
because I thought, look at that.
I thought the schmarmy guy was. I mean, obviously he was going to raise up from the dead and come at him one more time. Like, that's the predictability route.
Yeah, and that's the thing too about this movie is, while you won't watch it 1,000 times, the whole time you know what's happening. You know, like, you're not unaware of the situation and what Will's gotten himself into, but still you feel it in your stomach, and you still have, even the second time, like, I knew how it ended. I knew the lanterns were gonna, like, I knew everything, but I still watching it again, had that pit in my stomach the whole time. And that's something that a lot of films don't do for me anymore. Like, they give you those emotions, especially horror films. Like, they're few and far between that make you feel this way. And especially after knowing what you're getting yourself into. So, all right, Invitation, 2015, not to be confused with the one that came out, 2022, about vampires and shit.
Or the
superior.
2003 one with Lance Henriksen, where he invites a bunch of people to his house, and spoiler alert, doesn't
Don't
end
get
well.
confused. 2015, The Invitation. And the main dude that played Will, I can't think of his name. He's a great actor. I don't know if anyone else saw Upgrade. Upgrade was fantastic. Very under the radar.
Oh, that's
sci-fi
him. Yeah,
Really
that is
good.
good.
It was really
good.
good.
And he looks so much cooler with all that hair and beard. But anyways, 4, Invitation. So that's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. Join our Facebook group where we just talk about horror movies all day with like-minded individuals. And if you're feeling sad, join a cult. What do you have to lose? Blake, thank you again for joining us. It was a lot of fun. And thank you for choosing a movie that, for the most part, we all highly enjoyed.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, so signing off, I'm Jay with Blake, John, Kellen, and TJ. And until next time,
Keep it spooky.